The Striker is an incredibly fun class with two distinct playstyles to choose from. In this video, I'm going to be discussing engravings, abilities, and just general information you need to know to get a PvE build going for the Striker in Lost Ark. Hey everyone, my name is Shikari Dill. If you're new to my channel, I like to create content for MMORPGs as well as guides, so if you're into that sort of content, then I would greatly appreciate it if you hit that like and subscribe button, and let's jump right into the video. So when playing a Striker, you have two build options you can go for. They vary in gameplay style and both revolve around our class mechanic of generating and spending esoteric orbs. The first build comes in the form of the engraving Deathblow. What Deathblow does is it allows us to store up our meter for one additional orb. Our esoteric abilities will now consume all the orbs when activated and deal 35% extra damage for each orb consumed. That's a whopping 140% damage increase on our big esoteric abilities. This is a very strong engraving, and this is considered the stronger build of the two when you get closer to tier 3. This is also considered the more effort and higher skill cap build as compared to the Esoteric Flurry build, which is the other build I'll talk about later, because it requires in-depth knowledge of boss mechanics and when to actually activate your esoteric abilities to make sure you land them. Missing out on a Deathblow ability would result in a massive DPS loss, so this build is all about timing and positioning. So the abilities you use for this setup is dependent on how many skill points you currently have unlocked. I like to think of it as different stages of the build. At some point around 312 points, you're going to want to drop Swift Wind Kick and pick up Lightning Tiger Strike for its insane upfront damage. And that ability setup will stay pretty steady all the way up to 410 skill points, where you'll just see extra traits thrown on our abilities. Now there's a lot that goes into actually playing this build. I could create a whole other longer video explaining the ins and outs of Deathblow, but for this video I'm just going to summarize the general goal and playstyle. Generally the goal is to generate your esoteric orbs as quickly as possible. You generate anywhere from 3.5 to 4 orbs by using your full rotation of abilities. At that point, you'll want to decide on when the best time is to activate that big Deathblow ability in order to hit the boss, because again, missing that big hit would result in a massive DPS loss. And because you want to generate esoteric meter as much as you can, it's only natural that you would use a lot of wealth runes to slot into your abilities. Your stat priority for this build is going to be crit and specialization. Having a high crit chance with this build will just make your massive Deathblow burst even more massive and synergize with other engravings that you will run for this build. I'll talk about the other engravings you'll want to run for this build, as actually both this and the next build run these engravings. And lastly, you'll want your gems set up to be something like this. Now that was a bit of a summary and an overview of the Deathblow build. Well, what about the other build? Well, the other build is Esoteric Flurry. Esoteric Flurry is personally the build I enjoy more and the one that I've been running on my Striker. It is very strong and is probably the better build until you start getting into the way endgame content around tier 3. What Esoteric Flurry does is now your esoteric abilities only consume one orb, but now have a flat percent damage increase of 18% at level 3. Like the name suggests, this encourages a more steady and consistent use of your esoteric abilities, kind of creating a faster gameplay. In my opinion, this playstyle is a lot more fun and requires less effort to do than the Deathblow build. So much like the other build, your abilities are going to come and go in different stages. Pretty quickly you'll be dropping Triple Fist and picking up Sweeping Kick as a powerful ability, and then by the time you get all of your points unlocked and all of your traits, you'll end up dropping Sweeping Kick and pick up the even stronger Call of the Wind God ability. For the ability runes, Esoteric Flurry is a little bit more mixed than Deathblow. You'll want to slot one Rage rune into your Storm Dragon Awakening spell, as that one can actually trigger the rune 3 times, giving you a stacking buff. Then you'll want to slot in a couple Overwhelm runes for the stagger damage, and then a couple of Wealth runes for the esoteric meter increase. For this build, you're going to want to prioritize the stats crit and swiftness. Unlike Deathblow, where you're not constantly using your esoteric abilities, with this one you want swiftness so you can spam those esoteric abilities as much as possible. And lastly, this is what your gem setup should look like. I can't provide as much insight as I'd like to about the gems because I'm currently not that far along yet into endgame to provide my own input on it, so this is straight from a guide, which I'll link at the bottom for both the Deathblow and Esoteric Flurry build. So let's talk about some engravings that work alongside both those builds really well. Master of Ambush is a very strong and popular engraving to run on Striker. Basically, it'll increase the amount of damage our back attacks do, and this is really big for the Striker as most of our abilities will deal extra damage with back attacks to begin with, so you want to be mostly positioned behind the boss at all times. Grudge is also another great engraving, but should really only be used when you're able to max out its effect. Essentially, it'll increase your damage output, with the trade-off being you will also take more damage. It's for this reason that I would recommend only taking this engraving once you've gotten comfortable with positioning in boss fights. Keen Blunt Weapon is another powerful and popular engraving that is run on Striker. This will increase your crit damage, but has a chance to reduce non-crit damage overall. This engraving should net you more damage overall in the long run, as one of our main stats on Striker for both builds is crit. And lastly, we get to the card sets. Now, card sets can be important for some nice active effects, but it's likely you won't be anywhere near the optimal upgraded card set that you'll need until way later in the game. In the early stages, it's honestly better to run with whatever sets you do currently have that suits the content that you are doing. But once you get into the later stages of the end game, the real grind for getting this optimal card set begins. These cards offer a nice mix of damage reduction, as well as changing your damage type to holy and then buffing that damage, which is really nice. And that about covers it for both the Esoteric Flurry build and the Deathblow build for the Striker. My advice would be to try and get those 20 class engravings unlocked for either Deathblow or Esoteric Flurry. That way you can activate them early and try them out and see which one you prefer. As you may already be aware, you can do various forms of content like the tower floors, islands, dungeons, to get engraving tomes to unlock the ones that you want, and eventually slot them into your character panel to get those nodes active. I know this has been a lot of info, so I'll provide some guides in the description down below where I sourced a lot of this information. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this guide was able to help you out and give you a clear sense of direction on what to do for a Striker in PvE situation. Be sure to hit that sub button for more content on my channel, and I'll see you all in the next video.